Welcome to Calibrate Conversations, a podcast about embracing God's standard for sexuality. I'm your host, Brady, and joining me today is our guest, Aaron. So, Aaron, we are in the Sunshine State today. We're soaking up the sun. We're in Florida. So, I met you at a church here, the church we're in right now. About maybe 3 years ago, one of your pastors connected you to me, and we've lost touch at times, but it's been a joy to reconnect and hear about what God's done in your life. And so today we are going to share your story about walking through sexuality issues and the redemption and grace that's available in Christ. So let's just start from the beginning. Tell us about your childhood, growing up. Give us some background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me, Brady. I'm really excited to share this. Yeah, so a bit about me. Gosh, I was raised here in Florida on a little farm, actually real close to where we're at right now. I was homeschooled. I was the middle of 5 kids. We're all really tight. We're all really close. I have 2 incredibly loving parents. So I say all this because I think that's important context.
Yes.
Because, you know, people with these feelings of same-sex attraction, it's not like we all have the same background. So I think sometimes there's this cookie cutter mold that's like, well, this must have happened.
Not like you were sexually abused, or you had a horrible relationship with your dad.
Yeah, always. Or like, you know, I think you said on your podcast, your mom was taking certain medications or something. It's like, no, it's not. It's different because we're all different people and we're all dealing with things differently and we all end up in spots for various reasons. So, you know, I grew up homeschooled, but always feeling like a bit different, a bit odd. For a while, I didn't really fit in, didn't have a whole lot of friends just because, you know, homeschooling back in the 90s, it was kind of harder to connect as much. So I already had those feelings of kind of feeling like the oddball, you know, the weird kid. But there were also feelings that I had inside that were like, that I couldn't navigate, that I didn't really know why, additionally, I was feeling odd and different. And I couldn't really pinpoint it. And as I got a bit older, I started to realize that I had same-sex attraction. And I had felt that way for a while, but when you're young, you just kind of notice things. You maybe notice attractive people, but you don't, it's not inherently sexual because you don't even know what that is.
Yeah. So at what age were you starting to just notice men in ways that now you can look back and see the underpinnings of same-sex attraction?
Sure. I mean, honestly, like 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah. And when we're that age, we don't know how to process those feelings or what we're observing or why we're feeling that way.
Totally.
And that's why, you know, parents really need to be intentional about helping your kids process life around them and really trying to dig into what's going on in my child's heart.
Absolutely.
What are they feeling? And sometimes your kids might not be able to put into words and you don't get anywhere, but we need to really be intentional about understanding what's going on in my child's heart. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How are they processing the world around them?
Absolutely. And I mean, with my parents, it's like, you know, they didn't, we never, a little bit with my dad, but we didn't really ever talk about sex or anything like that. Just because we were a very conservative household and that's just the culture, right? But I will say my parents are both very loving. So I always felt safe to talk to them, which is key. So I remember, and this was evidence to me of how loving they were because I remember when I was in middle school, I was at this middle school camp and they said something along the lines of, if you're struggling with something, like, go talk to your dad. And they were talking in the context of, like, you know, Christian families and stuff like that, perhaps. But I knew, I felt like the Holy Spirit prompted me that I needed to go talk to my dad specifically about this. Just to give a little context, I became a Christian at 7. You know, to the degree a 7-year-old can understand the gospel. It was still, you know, pretty basic, but I remember giving my heart to God in the capacity I was able to, you know, and I had a sensitivity towards God. I had a sensitivity towards the Holy Spirit. So I think that's very important.
Yes, because I think that people assume that with this one sin issue, if you struggle with that or you fall into it or you backslide into it, that obviously you weren't
Oh my
saved.
gosh, you must be like a God-hating person who just wanted to find the most debaucherous lifestyle. Like, this is the way people think about it. You're like,
so then they think, well, that person must not have been a Christian to begin with. And that's just absolutely.
And it's so heartbreaking because they'll look at maybe examples in the gay community of people that maybe did have a path like that. And they're just completely discrediting people who are like, I'm just over here trying to tell you how I'm feeling. And that's how I have felt for so long, where, you know, it's just like people would say these really ignorant statements. And I'd be like, I wouldn't always speak up, but I'd be like, that's just so wrong. I remember I was at a youth camp and this kid I knew, he was a Christian, he's from a Christian family. He's like, he made this horrible offhanded statement of, yeah, you know, I could never be gay because if I was, my dad would beat it out of me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, my heart breaks for you.
Yes.
Because even though it was like a kind of a joke, he was serious to the extent.
That came from somewhere.
Yeah, that came from somewhere. And I'm just like, how horrible is that? Like, fine. Maybe you don't have same-sex attraction, but I bet you if you have any other struggles in your life, you're still not going to go to your dad. Absolutely. Like, what kind of example? Again, this was a Christian family. This was one of our homeschool families we knew. And I was just like, it broke my heart. So in contrast, I felt the Holy Spirit prompting me to talk to my dad. And I remember being at the camp and I called my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I need to talk to you when I get home. And he's like, okay. So I kind of like thrown it out there. And it was kind of like, because I knew I wouldn't have the gumption or the bravery to do when I got home. So then when I got home, I always hoped, I was like, he's going to forget. He's like, hey, Aaron, you wanted to talk to me about something? I was like, ugh. So we were driving one night and he said, what's it about? And I said, Dad, I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but I was just like, I'm attracted to guys. You know, I just is. I don't really know why. And I'm like, but this isn't like where I want to be or anything. And my dad was so kind, so gracious. He even just compared it to struggles of his life, like that are totally different. He has, you know, and it was just like so kind of him and so balanced. The fact that he was like, you're dealing with something, Aaron. I deal with my own stuff too. Let's fight this together. Let's walk this journey together. That's
really remarkable that your dad would have that insight in the moment.
Yes.
Because so many times we freak out in the moment.
Yes.
And so that's really a blessing that your dad had enough spiritual maturity to respond in that way.
And I love telling that story because I want people to just be like, how that impacted me in such a positive way. Like, let us be gracious and loving towards people when we maybe don't understand exactly where they're coming from. That's okay. We don't have to understand everything to be gracious and loving, right?
Yes.
But what's funny is I then thought like, well, everything should be fine now. I have loving parents. Because a few years later, I also shared with my mom in a different context, and she was also super gracious and loving. A lot of my family, I talked with them. And so it was just one of those things. Well, so I'm trying to work through this, right? Or in whatever capacity that is. That was another thing, Brady. I'm like, what is working through this? And when I reached high school, still dealing with these feelings, but I was pretty good at like suppressing them, I guess you could say. I just came off just like your clean cut goody two shoes. I didn't really date, and I guess everyone's like, "Oh, Aaron's too mature for that." I was like, "Yeah, but there's more playing." And I didn't even know how to define it. I just didn't really care to go out with the girls. It wasn't even like I was consciously thinking about it. I didn't want to go out with the guys. I just didn't know how I was navigating. But when I lusted, I knew what I lusted at.
Yes.
In my loneliness, in my most difficult times, I knew what I was attracted to, where my heart went. So it was interesting because around high school, I gotten connected with like this organization, and really, really beneficial in a lot of ways. It was like dealing with like sexual addictions and things like that. And it was really helpful in some ways, and it's helped a lot of people I know. But when it came to same-sex attraction, they had a lot of like simple fixes. They were always really big on like retraining the brain. It was always like retrain the brain. And so I would go and I would be told this of like, just retrain your brain. And there's some aspects to that of like retraining. Okay, so where do I go when I feel lonely? Okay, I go here. So like retrain my habits and stuff like that. But sexuality is
very complicated and deep.
Yes, so much so. And so with that, I would struggle again, or in my moments of struggle, I would be attracted to guys, and it would crush me. it would just crush me because I'm like, what is wrong with me? I love God. I love God. And that was the thing too. It was like I also equated any even attraction to guys as like, well, I've already like, it's like I've looked at porn or hooked up. It's like, it was almost like everything with it. It just took all this baggage of defeat, you know, of just finding someone even attractive. It was just like, it cut me so deep of like, why? Because I'm being told, well, Aaron, if you love God enough, or if you have enough faith, or if you do all these things, you know, that you won't feel that anymore. And so when I didn't get that outcome, it was crushing.
Mm-hmm. And many times I see guys like us who have those unrealistic expectations placed upon us, and then we become disillusioned towards Christianity and the church. It's like, they promised me this, and it didn't happen. So then I guess that maybe nothing that they say is true.
Right. You're like, I don't know what to believe because you died on this hill. You told me this would be the outcome. And I have followed it to the T, which is very works-based.
Yes.
But the church encourages that.
Yes, absolutely.
They're like, work really hard on this. And you're like, okay.
Yeah. And it's so hard because we want black and white answers, and we want a system and a program and a timeline and to check the boxes. And so we put other people's timeline on somebody else's sanctification.
Yes.
And it's so hard because but we also don't want to give up on sanctification and just say, oh, you just live like that forever. And so we have to use discernment and prayer, the Holy Spirit, to help people keep pushing forward in their walk with God, with their sanctification, with their transformation, and yet trust it's on God's timeline, not ours. And so what is the next step forward for this person? And yet not some legalistic, self-righteous, works-based, check all these boxes and you'll be good type program.
Absolutely. And I think during that time, and completely, like, I think during that time I started getting a lot of like the classic rhetorics, the things that it was like you've mentioned on your podcast many times, of just like people giving you those like one-liners and those things of like, well, it's just like this, so do this and it will resolve that. And you're like, but like you say, this is a very complex issue. It just is.
Yeah. You know, the line, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. That's how zero people overcome same-sex attraction.
Literally, all these little quips and these things people say, I'm just like, it's like they've never actually stopped and talked to someone who is walking this path. That actually is it. Or they have talked to someone, because I will tell you, Brady, there were times in the past, and it was throughout high school and stuff and early college, that I feel like I was kind of, because I was kind of open with some of my friends in my church community, and people would kind of use me as like a, see, Aaron conquered it. And the reason is because I was believing I was conquering it. And see, the sad thing is, it wasn't conquering selfishness. It wasn't conquering, like a lust issue. It was like conquering finding guys attractive. Like that was the goal. That was it. Everything else, it was like free reign.
Don't care about all the other issues in your life.
Oh my gosh, just like you could be a terrible gossip or unkind or ungracious, but like don't have these. So it was just a really poor gauge. So why that was really damaging for me as well is because I would share with people, and it was like I think I would share at times like this of everything past tense, because it is easier to share everything past tense. Oh, I don't deal with this anymore. That was old me. It was like everyone's comfortable. No one's uncomfortable with you saying that, right? But also, and this was really bad, people would sometimes say, like, I would share what I'm sharing, to a degree, and they would say stuff like, but you're still attracted to women, right? And of course, they set you up where it's like, yeah, like totally, because you clearly need to hear that. That is the expectation. That is, so how am I supposed to be honest with you, especially if I fall again into lust, fall again sometimes in just to like attraction of just like, okay, I'm just trying to not let my feelings control me. But it made me feel isolated, because it was like, even though I know people love me, it felt like oftentimes they loved a version of me.
And I felt that so many times in the church over the last almost 20 years now. They so much rejoice over what God has done, but I'm kind of the token, proof of redemption is possible. But then they put this pressure on you to perform in that role. and then they put you on the pedestal, and then you can't be honest when you are struggling.
Exactly.
Because they'll be so disappointed because their love for you came from the fact that you've overcome this.
And it's part of their narrative. It is part of their narrative that, see, it's a choice. And again, I think you've said this on your podcast. It's like we have to kind of define what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Because none of us woke up as a 6-year-old boy and say, I'm going to start noticing men in some different ways and have these kind of emotional voids.
Oh my goodness.
Eventually I get to puberty and I sexualize them.
Absolutely. So I think what a lot of Christians think is you wanted the most thrilling sexual experience, so that's where you found it. I've talked to so many gay guys who will say things like, or same-sex attraction guys who will say things like, why would I choose this? Why would I choose my family rejecting me? Why would I choose to be outcast by, and this is sometimes even people who, older than me, who have walked a journey where it was like they felt rejected by society.
Yes.
So my point with that is this is not something that people are just like, this just seems like a best fit for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It's not this simple thing.
And then certainly we make choices over the years that then sometimes perpetuate.
I
just like with
agree.
Any issue, when we give ourselves to pornography, hookups, every time we take those steps, our hearts are further hardened.
Yes.
And it really cements in that I can get something from these people. And so we make those types of choices, but no one wakes up one day and chooses to be attracted to men or any subgroup of people. And so and I think we have this false dichotomy, which I've talked about many times, of either you're born that way or it's a choice. So if we understand from spiritually that we developed this and our heart responded in a certain way, it's like, well, then it's a choice if you weren't born that way. It's like, it's so much more complicated
Absolutely.
than that.
And that's the thing. People will talk about it being a choice as far as like the same-sex attraction. It's like, no, my choice is not going and looking at porn.
Yes. My choice is denying myself.
Yes, it's denying myself, which we're all denying ourselves. Which is where it's really cool that like the Christian people that I'm around now, like we're all walking a journey of dying to self. That is the Christian life of like, it's not about me.
Yes.
But so often, and this is how I was for so long, it was just kind of like, as long as I'm not gay, I'm good. Mm-hmm. As long as I don't have these feelings, I'm good. Not actually dealing with much deeper issues going on. Or like lust issues. No. It's because I'm attracted to guys. If I wasn't attracted to guys, that would solve my lust issues. Like, what? Where did that come from? But I don't think I was even getting good, necessarily, counsel on that, because whenever I shared, everyone became hyper fixated on the same-sex attraction. And you actually talked about this. You had said something like, you can talk to someone with same-sex attraction. You don't even have to talk about that issue.
Yes. They have a million issues in their life and so many layers of someone's heart that if we're ministering to someone who's gay, not a believer, we don't need to focus on that one issue.
Of course.
But if we're also walking alongside someone with same-sex attraction, we want to help them build their relationship with Christ.
Absolutely.
And so many times when we then help them deal with dysfunction or lies they believe or just areas of immaturity in their heart, that works itself out in the area of sexuality, because you don't even realize that all those things are connected.
Absolutely.
And so we need to see the whole person and help them grow in their relationship with God and grow in sanctification and wholeness with Christ. And then the outward symptoms work themselves out.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that.
At Calibrate Ministries, we have an entire ministry just for parents of LGBTQ kids, because we want to be able to shepherd your hearts and encourage you and pray for you and your family as you navigate these situations. So just go to calibrateministries.com and fill out the contact form, and I'd love to be in touch with you about how you can be involved in that ministry.
So what had happened, like, it was funny. I think when you and I first met, I was in this time of life where it was interesting. I kind of would always like dive a little deeper into sin. So I got to a point where I was going to, online gay chat rooms and stuff. And it was because then there was actually another person on the other end. Like there's actually someone communicating with me. Mm-hmm. I feel even more validated for me, right? And I got to this point where I was just like, this is so wrong. Again, I know in my heart, I don't want this. I don't want to be letting my lust lead me, right? But I got some counsel after that to pursue relationships, pursue pursue like marriage relationships, right? Which the thing that I struggle with that as being advice is, again, it's a quick fix. It's like I'm sharing some really deep, serious stuff that I'm going through. And someone's like, you know what you should do? You should pursue a woman. And
as if a woman can redeem your heart. Like redemption only comes from Christ.
Yes.
And so being married is not a sign that we've been healed. It doesn't help with our healing. In fact, what a horrible thing to put on your spouse, to think that you are going to heal these deep things inside.
Absolutely. But then as me being me and me being like a human, it's like, great, I found a solution. Here's my solution. It must be, right? So, there was a time where I was like dating and stuff. And the thing was, I got to a point where I was like, well, if I date a really wonderful person, and that happened, I dated this wonderful person, a lot of respect in the relationship, all that. And it didn't work out, and that's okay. But at that time, because I was kind of also, I sometimes feel like I was like a bit of a paper mache man, where it was like something just had to come, like pressure of life, pressure of reality come and set in, and it just like, I buckled under it. Because up until that point, I was even like, I had never actually...
You had the outer shell, but
oh my goodness,
structure.
Growing up homeschooled Christian, like, you know how to talk the talk. Like, you can come off, people would just be like, oh, you're such a good guy. I would think to myself, I'm like, you don't even know what's going on in my heart. I really dislike when people do that. They make a lot of assumptions because you present well. And it's like and that puts the pressure on me of like, now I can't be a struggling person because that's not, you like me for the outer shell that I am.
Yes.
Right? And so that had happened, and when I realized a relationship wasn't because after that relationship ended, where did my heart quickly go back to? Well, what were my habits? When I was lonely, when I was depressed, when I felt rejected, I'd go to porn. And I wanted validation. So I'm dealing with what I've now identified as like a sexual addiction, which had never really been identified as that. I'm just like, I'm not really addicted. I just do it habitually, when I'm sad. It's like, oh, it sounds like addictive behavior, but who am I? So kind of like realizing, so this is where I'm going. But that was the thing. I got to a point in life where I wanted to stop feeling. Like I knew my pattern. I had looked at my life. I had been to the conferences. I had been to the camps. I had made, repented, turned from my ways, told my pastor, told my parents, confessed all, start again, new day, never going back, go back, discouraged, go back further. And I was looking at my life and I'm just like, Aaron, I see how I am. Like I'm looking at this objectively. What am I doing? And it didn't put me to push at this time of my life. It did not push me to.
So how old were you at this point?
This was later 20s.
Cool.
Yeah. And so this was after you and I knew each other. So, and it was funny too, because I remember thinking, I actually thought this. I was like, no one in my shoes, no one gets it. And I literally thought, I was like, but Brady does. You were the only person I could even think of, which is sad. Not sad about you. It's sad that we don't have more people we know. Like I will share sometimes my story with people and people will be like, wow, like I've never known anyone who deals with this. And I think to myself, you have.
You just didn't know it.
You just didn't know it. But again, that's so sad that the church has not created a platform. Not that we always need to be talking about like, our sexual orientations and all that stuff, but like a place to share, because I just felt so alone. And I'd been told over and over that you need to conquer this. And again, the focus was all on the wrong thing.
It was on you conquering it, not Jesus conquering it.
It was on me conquering it, and it had to look a certain way, and it had to have the outcome of getting married and having a few kids. Like that's the goal. And I'm like, now I look back and I'm like, I think the goal is that I follow Christ. I die to self. I live for him.
Yes.
And my life,
not only in that area of life, but every area of your life.
Every area of my life. So my life doesn't have to look like, and oh my gosh, I'm so blessed with the community I have around, but my life doesn't look like a lot of my friends. And they're amazing people. They never are like, when are you getting married, Aaron? They don't have that attitude, but I can cast that on myself because I can run around with comparison being like, why am I not like them? Why am I abnormal? Why do I have to feel differently? Why was marriage just not this natural next step like it was for everybody else? So it actually happened, I would say, the time that I really dove head into, this lifestyle and my sin addiction. Like, that's the thing. It's just like, it just takes you to everywhere. It was when all my friends had gotten married, and I started to isolate. Again, I have I had such wonderful people in my life, still do, and they didn't put that on me, but I was putting it on myself because I'm like, I'm the weirdo. I'm the one who relationships haven't worked out. My life just, I don't even at this point even have a desire to pursue a relationship with a woman. But I know what makes me happy. I know what makes me feel good in the moment. I know where my attraction is. So what happened was I kind of like teetered in that direction without any restraints. Like in the past, I would have, tried to have accountability in my life. So I just kind of like let that go. It was kind of one of those things of if something happens, it happens. That was kind of my attitude. And in this time, I stopped communicating with people. People would ask how I was doing, and I would say fine. And if they pressed and they were like, oh, like, are you really fine? It would upset me. I'd be like, into myself, not to their face, but I'd be like, I just told you I was fine. Let it be. Okay. So at this time, I was just looking for connection. I was feeling lonely. Part of that was me, isolating myself. Part of it was not having a healthy view of what a healthy connection is, right? So I did what the world does, where they're like, it must be sex, right? Because you want to feel connected to somebody. And it's like, what a sad way to view things.
Absolutely.
What a sad way to view things. But it's also really fun. Like, that's another thing is like being raised in the church. Sometimes people are like, oh, sin, it's terrible. And it's like, well,
that's actually really pleasurable.
Yeah. Like, I'm just like, why are we saying that? Like, no, we don't do it because that's not God's best for our life.
Yes.
That's not what he's called us to.
It's still sin, but let's not misrepresent that this is a really...
Yeah, I feel like people do that to like scare you away. And then you experience, you're like, oh, actually, I'm meeting really fun people. Oh, this actually feels really great. Oh, all this stuff. But here's the thing. So like I started going out and hooking up all the time. And it started out kind of slow, and then it just kind of snowballed. And I'm a very social person. So it was interesting how even through these choices, my natural personality was coming out. Like I was connecting with people. I was meeting new people. I was having fun. I was going out. So it was like, there was this part of me of longing for connection that was very real, very good. Like, yes, I do need connection. I want connection.
You were with people then who understood.
Yes.
And there's just this instant and like we get each other.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the draws for guys with same-sex attraction, because with men struggling with sexual sin, with heterosexual wise, like they have all this attraction towards women and they're pursuing women, but they still don't understand each other. It's like they're very different.
Sure.
But with men with same-sex attraction, there's this commonality, this just deep, instant connection of we get each other. And there's actually comfort in that that continues to pull us towards that community. And whether it's hookups, friendships, relationships of I'm one of you and you're one of me, and we understand each other at such a deep level.
Absolutely. And I remember having this thought throughout this time, because it was about a year in a sense, but it was like, I remember having the thought of like, because I was so candid with these guys and I could just talk about anything. And I've noticed people just open up about their lives when you listen. So they're telling me all their stories. And most of them are like, this is very sad. A lot of stories we're just genuinely very sad. Not even about same-sex attraction, but a lot of other stuff in life. And I'm like, okay, it doesn't seem like we're in healthy places. This is what I was thinking. It was like, okay, fine. You're living out your truth, if you will. But like, this still doesn't sound like healthy life decisions, right? Healthy life choices. But I thought to myself, I was like, I'm at least being honest. I'm at least being honest. And a very core thing about me is I long for honesty in myself and from others. And you can't always get it overnight, but like, I long for truth and I long for honesty. And it just felt like finally I wasn't lying. Finally, I wasn't having to say like, oh yeah, I'm attracted to women too, just to appease, because people, I don't know if you experienced this, but sometimes it was like, people were like, well, you're not like those guys, right? Because we don't like those guys, but you're still like cool, right? You still like women, right? You're just also, maybe sometimes attracted to guys. And it felt sometimes like it was like they had this idea of how people were. They don't like those people, but they like me. So they wanted to fit me in the box of people they could still like.
Yes.
They could still affiliate with.
put you in a box where you're not like them.
Oh, right.
But you haven't crossed the boundary yet to make you unacceptable.
So that was another thing too, is a lot of times people give these these parts about, they'll talk about someone with same-sex attraction, and I've noticed people will tack on often, depending on who they're talking about, oh, but he's never acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, that's great. That's fine. That's wonderful that they've haven't done that. But it feels like oftentimes in the church people will say that as kind of like they're still cool.
Yeah.
They still love Jesus. They've never acted on it. So then it's kind of like, and for those of us who have,
where do we fit?
And then it's like oh, right. No, God can still love you. And then it made me have to be like, what does the gospel say? Like, I had to stop listening to what a lot of other people were inferring. A lot of times people don't say it outright. It's the way in which they'll talk about others and other situations. And you're over there listening of like, this applies to me. You just maybe don't know.
Yes.
And so I'm getting a lot through here. So I had to, again, be like, hey, what does the word say? But throughout this time, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, at least I'm being honest, right? And I have to say, I never was suicidal, but there were many days I would be driving home from a hookup and I would just ask myself, why am I living?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is not living. And I hated it from both ends because, the gay community was applauding me. They're like, you're living out your truth. I'm like, but I'm not even like proud of the way I'm living, and you're all applauding me. But then it was like the church, I felt like I couldn't really, I felt this way. This wasn't true. I know this now, but I felt like in many ways I couldn't or didn't want to share because it was so shameful. But also part of it was that would bring a response. If I share it, now it's like, okay, now what are you going to do about it? Like, then I have to give up this feeling of connection, this fun that I'm having. So there would be so many days that I was just feeling like torn apart. And it was like, I just hurt so much. I just hurt all the time. But I didn't know what to do with it because everyone's quick fixes in the church just weren't working and they were not applying to me. So again, I'm like, I guess I'm even more damaged than everybody, that's what I feel often we can feel. But it's like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? So I was living this way for a while. I even had gone out on some dates and stuff like that and that was not crazy. It's just funny. It's like you meet some wonderful people. A lot of it was just really, really shallow, really unhealthy. Yes. But sometimes, because again, we want to paint like the gay community as like, oh, they're all horrible, can't have a healthy, really can't have a good conversation, can't love someone. And it's like, no, I met some really considerate, kind guys.
Yes.
Who really thought about me and like were concerned. And
many times I've gotten together with parents and I get together with so many amazing, awesome parents. But sometimes what I've heard is that after their son comes out of the closet, it's like, oh, but he was always such a good kid and he was so talented and kind. It's like, he's still in it. Like, and
what
he still is. So let's rejoice in that.
Absolutely.
And so many times guys with same-sex attraction are very sensitive. And I think that certain personalities are more susceptible. That doesn't mean we're just born with it.
Sure.
But certain personalities are more susceptible that's how their heart responds to certain different circumstances.
Absolutely.
Believe certain things.
Absolutely.
Lead them in a certain direction.
Absolutely.
And one of those is guys who are just really artistic, sensitive, sometimes deep thinkers, very intuitive about people. And they tend to then respond in a certain way that takes them that direction. And we should celebrate those giftings and those personalities that God gave them and not just think that, well, now that they're dealing with that, they're all bad and everything about them is bad.
Exactly. And what's so sad is I was viewing myself in that way. And it probably was a lot because that was like the culture of, again, people inferring, even if not saying directly, where it's like, I am all bad. I must be. Because why would I be feeling this way and why would I be living this way if I wasn't just all bad? But again, even throughout this time, and this is where I feel like it's super important to note, it's like I had the Holy Spirit. Like there was something inside of me ripping. Like it wasn't just like I was like, this is all dandy and everything's great. No, far from it. But I didn't know how to stop.
Yeah. And so you were feeling conviction.
Absolutely.
And afterwards, after a hookup, you would feel that depression and conviction and like this wasn't life-giving, especially even though it was good in the moment.
Sure. Absolutely. Until the next day.
My experiences in those moments was that then you have this person in front of you that you just use in this way. And then you hear their struggles in life. And you mentioned you heard that's like, man, like this isn't healthy for you. Then you realize I was a part of their unhealthy behavior. They were seeking something from me that I was willing to provide for them, but is just causing more devastation in their life because what they need is Jesus. And then there's this guilt of like, how could I have done this to that person?
Absolutely.
I have pastors and church leaders regularly reach out to me about speaking at their churches and events. If that's something you would be interested in, feel free to go to calibrateministries.com and fill out the contact form, and I'd love to talk to you about what that would look like.
And so what ultimately happened was some friends of mine found out what was happening, and they sat me down. And we had one of the most awkward conversations of my life, because in the way they found out, it was pretty clear what was happening. It was very clear what was happening. And at the beginning of the conversation, I was quite mad because I was like, listen to your business, blah, blah, blah. By the end of that conversation, I was breaking. I was breaking. And I was just barely hanging on by a thread for a couple of years now, even through those dating relationships. There were great moments, but there was still this sense of I don't even know who I am. And the part of me that I do know that I am, I don't even like him. I just really don't. It was just I felt like this fragile ego, barely staying together. And it was just finally, it was just all breaking down. And I mean, my life was kind of at a point where it's and I'm pretty objectively looking at my behaviors. These aren't great behaviors. Just pretty flat out. I'm like, this is not great. But even just these feelings that I'm having, I'm I don't think I've really been broken, but also actually being I can't do this. I cannot be good. I definitely cannot be good enough. And I need help. I need help so desperately. And it was at that time that really there was a brokenness about me that happened. And I'd love to think, hopefully, I'm continually being broken and humbled and more turning to God in times in everything. But just my understanding of where have I gotten to and why have I come here? And it was funny. I immediately reached out to my church, and I have to say, I cannot speak well enough about my church. They responded the way the gay community says Christians never will respond. And so there's a part of me that just loves, I love to prove people wrong and knowing how there are people living out the gospel consistently. Not this we let those but not you. What did you do? No, that was not them at all. And my pastor always says, he goes, we are not shocked by sin, but we're uncomfortable with it. And I love that because it was that's what I experienced. They weren't Aaron, what? It was it just opened up a lot of conversations and stuff. But then it was let's come alongside.
Yes. And I think that there's so many areas where we can go in a ditch on one side or the other and be off balance. And I love the paradigm of we're not shocked by sin, but we're uncomfortable with it a little bit because we should be, because we want you to be able to move on from this. And so not being shocked by sin and loving anyone regardless of where they're at, but also trying to move them forward, not just dismissing. So many times we dismiss it. Oh, we're all sinners. And sometimes we use that because we don't want to enter the messiness of this is going to be a long, hard, messy journey, but we're alongside you in this. And so we just dismiss it for one reason or another.
Absolutely. And that's a great point because it was that was another feeling I was having because I was well, I just went and finally lived this lifestyle and was able to be honest in a way, in a sense. I was if I can't be honest in my church, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm doing. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, where they're I just want to be honest. But you're right. It's we want to just get quick fixes, not realizing we're all on a journey. We're all on a journey. I'm not alone in this, clearly, but also okay, I'm dying to self, but there's a lot of guys who are married who are dying to, not lusting after every woman they see.
Absolutely.
So it's like, that's very comparable, different, but very comparable.
Yeah.
Like, we're all called to die to self. I'm not just, none of us as Christians should just be living out however we want. What kind of life is that?
Yeah. And that leads to pride, arrogance, greed, just misplaced identity in so many areas. And in the gay community, it's so much about identity, but we're so kind of numb to misplaced identity everywhere else in our life, our career, our family, our kids, athletics, the vehicle we drive, so many things where we get consumed with identity. And God wants to remake that so our identity is Him, not in those other things. But this is the one issue that seems so glaring to most of the Christian world. And I think it's, as we're walking alongside people, there's a double-edged coin or a double-sided coin where, on one hand, amongst our men, we need to understanding we're all struggling with something. We're all struggling with sexuality to some degree, whether it's gay or straight, or women, you're married and trying not to look at other women, how the guys in our church taking pornography. And so there's a way that we can relate to every guy. We level the playing field. We're all in this together. At the same time, we don't want to be dismissive of the unique struggles of specific guys. So it's okay for me to say, Aaron, like, oh man, I'm so sorry you're dealing with that. I'm going to walk alongside you. I'm going to love you. You can share anything going on in your heart. And I don't completely understand, but that's okay, because we're brothers in Christ and we can still love each other through this. And I think we pretend like we completely understand, or we don't even try to, we just dismiss, oh, we're on this together, we're all sinners. But sometimes that can be used as an excuse to not enter the messiness, or we just want to feel like we have all the answers for someone's like, well, my sin is no different.
Right. That's just what I did.
Yeah.
Just do these things.
Yeah.
I'll solve.
Yep. But every person is different. So we have the camaraderie of we're all sinners on this journey together, and still be okay with, I don't completely understand this brother's sin issues. And that's okay. We can still walk alongside each other in love and grace.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that, because that was even what I've experienced as well, because there is a commonality, but then there's a difference.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, we don't have to understand everything about someone's journey or story or struggle to have love, grace, and come alongside an encouragement. So it was just this time, when God brought me to that point of just like brokenness, it's not this, it is the thing now. It's just like, what I appreciate, there's this part of me that appreciates that, like, I don't feel like I have to lie to the people close to my life. It's not like everyone, I'm like, okay, but like those close to my life, because I think used to be, were just like, Aaron, we just need to find you a nice girl. Like, that was the attitude. And again, I mean, like, that marriage is a wonderful thing, like, obviously. But I think if we're not careful, we can treat it like a quick fix.
Yeah.
And if it was like, I felt unseen, because it was like, it doesn't feel like anyone's actually hearing what I'm saying. To your point about like, the struggle being unique, it's like, I don't feel like you're actually hearing what I'm saying. And so just feeling that, even when I feel sometimes even the people around me don't, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but God does. And that, there are times where I look around at the church, and if I'm not careful, I get discouraged because I see people, at my age already married with lots of kids and, all these things seemingly perfect. And it can be discouraging. But when I look at God's word, I feel so encouraged, because I feel seen, I feel loved, I feel valued, and I don't feel like I have to give in to all these feelings that are real. They're real things. I don't want to just describe me like, it's just, no, it's there, but I don't have to be a slave to it. Yes. And that is where the freedom is, because I know who I am in God. And lies come up all the time. That's the thing. Just like so many of our journeys, it's not just like, and we fix it, never dealt with it again. No, I mean, I don't know many people. Some people have that experience, but many of us, it's like pride can come back in, wanting to do things on my own back. Yeah. Lust can come back in. All of it can come back in. So I have to constantly be humbling myself, reaching out and reaching just to God, saying, God, I need you, because I cannot walk this journey alone. And again, we've oversimplified things in the church. We're doing a disservice, because we're not laying out, no, this is a hard, but it's worth it because of God.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Aaron, one thing I want to talk about was when we go down this, sanctification journey and we're starting to connect with, men in the church in healthy ways, so many times our hearts can twist those relationships in the church. And also you're being vulnerable and you're actually allowing men in the church to feed this unhealthy desire for connection in ways that you were in the gay community. Now it just looks good because it's in a Christian context.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because we need men, especially in our life, to listen to us, to love us, to walk this journey with us. But then it's also men that we struggle with. And so then when a man shows us a lot of love and grace, sometimes our heart can twist that. We can develop lust for him, even though we didn't before, because those emotional pathways are crossed. But then also we can just seek the same idols inside the church that we were outside the church. And then we get patted on the back for it because it looks Christian. So how do you guard yourself? How do you process through what am I seeking? What is healthy about this? What is off about this? And make sure we're not going down those paths.
That's really insightful, especially with the thing about seeming so spiritual, because I typically am a very vulnerable person. And in the church, oftentimes it's applauded. But sometimes I use that as kind of a tactic. I don't even know. Or in the past, I didn't even realize that I was doing it because I wanted I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel approved of. It was this manipulative, I want something in return. I'm not just being open. I want you to open up as well, oftentimes. So I think for me, the way to guard myself, it's really interesting. It's like, I don't necessarily go into situations being like, guard my heart, guard my heart. It's really about where I'm finding my identity. So I think it sometimes kind of starts a couple steps before, because I really do struggle with codependency. And, it's funny. I mean, not funny. It's interesting. Like, I never lived out my sexuality until, later years of my life. But when I was younger, even though I truthfully did not really lust after the people in my life, the guys in my life, I never did. I didn't even let my mind go there. However, I was using them to fill an emotional need.
Yes.
Which is, it can veer over into something sexual. It could. It didn't for me. And yet, through that was still wrong. I was using them to fill me up, it looks different from the outside. I get that. But I think for me to guard myself against that is really just knowing who I am in God, knowing my value in God, and then like, I'm still an extremely relational person. So I want those relationships, but I guess it's, just like everything else, checking our hearts, checking our motives. For me, I have to check my motives sometimes, if I'm really wanting to hang out with someone all the time. Well, why? Well, because that will make me feel like I have value. It's like, well, that's not the case. I have value. And also, if I keep down that road, that will be a crushing weight on that other person. Sometimes I could be like clingy in friendship. And it's like, that's not fair for that other person. So the most loving thing I could do is be like, you know what? Consider my heart. But it really does for me. I think it's just come in knowing who I am in God, which is still like ongoing thing.
And then having the humility to have some self-awareness of, the relationships around us, letting other guys speak into that, even though they might be wrong at times and misconstrue things, but having the humility, knowing that my heart is deceitful. I might be misusing these relationships. And so I need to be aware and always working on those and aware what my heart is seeking from these guys in the church and this community around me.
Yeah.
Another aspect that I think is a little unique, guys with same-sex attraction, not completely unique. I know that heterosexual guys do this too, but there is such a draw towards like chat rooms, apps where you chat with other guys that feels so addictive. And it's, back in my very early years, chat or apps were kind of a new thing back then. So that's ridiculous. That aged me a little bit, but apps were kind of a new thing. But it was so addictive because you want this response from someone and you want this response from a person on the other end. But then I find the Christian community is really, really horrible at the amount of unhealthy emotional connections that happen online. And that's why I've never started like, a private Facebook group where guys with SSA, things like that, because they tend to open up and there's this commonality. We make each other emotionally vulnerable, and then it goes south quickly. And over the years, I've blocked hundreds of guys on Facebook and Messenger, Christian guys, where you start talking and you realize you have this commonality, and then 5 minutes later, they're sharing new pictures of themselves. And part of it feels like to them, like this connection, and I want to be vulnerable and I want to be known. And you also love Jesus. And so we want to be fully known to each other. And I don't see that aspect of struggle within kind of heterosexual guys who are Christians. Obviously, they still sin with women and they have lost issues
And those are feelings of connection.
and pornography.
Yeah.
But it's so hard where our community needs to be with men, but then we cross those connections so easily, and it goes there so quickly.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to be guarded with other guys with same-sex attraction. And I see a lot of guys mistakenly think that, oh, all my community comes from other guys with same-sex attraction because they actually understand me. And that's not healthy. We need real relationships with real people in our church. And even if they don't understand us as well as they would like, they're the ones who I think are going to have the biggest impact on us, not the online guys, that we met in a Facebook group that seems like they instantly get us and we have so much in common, but it becomes really unhealthy.
I totally agree. What's interesting with that though, I think sometimes it's actually even a bigger thing of like, I think culturally we have really skewed views on all friendship.
Yes.
In the same way, people will be like, I grew up hearing people be like, oh, you cannot be friends with someone of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And it's because we live in a culture in the church as well that we over-sexualize.
Yes.
So, even a classic story that always broke my heart, people would be like, oh, clearly Jonathan and David were gay.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, clearly? Like, that's what's just so sad, because people are like, oh, but look at their intimate friendship. And I'm like, and actually that is an area of my life I'm really grateful for years. I think it's because I grew up in a really healthy family and a great community. I have for years had wonderful, deep friendships with guys. So that I think I got a good gauge of what that was, which I think actually was even slightly more jarring when I did, go into the gay culture, because I think a lot of those people maybe haven't had those friendships as much. So like they were kind of like, well, if we're getting close, I guess we need to do something. It's like, whoa, why? Like, it doesn't have to go there. Oh, but it does. And it's like, no, that's so heartbreaking that you have been conditioned.
Yes.
By culture, by porn, by a lot of different things, that it's like, well, connection leads to the ultimate connection. I'm doing air quotes for those on podcast.
Yes.
Of sex. And it's like, that is so heartbreaking. No.
Absolutely. And, I think that in some ways, I don't want to say we've been given a gift, but in some ways, living in community forces us to deal with our misplaced expectations, connections, idolatry, because we need to be in relationships with other men, but then we have to make sure that that's healthy.
Yeah.
Whereas men who sexualize women and
There's like, well, I never interact with it.
they just cut them out. It's like, no, that to me, that's completely wrong too. There are sisters of Christ, and we need redemption in our hearts so that we can have brotherly and sisterly relationships with them without sexualizing them, instead of just completely cutting them out.
Right.
So it's like, I can't just cut out all the men. I need deep connection with them and relationship with them. And so I have to find some restoration in my heart so that my heart can have healthy relationships with them. And heterosexual men need to do the exact same thing with women. They need to find restoration so they can love their sisters in Christ and not just completely avoid women the rest of their life, which is what we perpetuate so many times in the church.
100%.
So, Aaron, we are running out of time. I so much love your story. Do you have any other just parting words of wisdom for Christians, for guys with same-sex attraction, for church leaders, for anyone?
Wow, you just like,
yeah, do I have the door is open? Do you have anything in there? There's something in there. We need to do this again because you're very well spoken and you're very reflective and very self-aware. And so you have a lot of wisdom. And so anything that our listeners should hear today?
Man, I feel like just having a whole lot of grace, on every direction. Because I think we are in a culture right now of the church where, well,
we show grace, they're going to misconstrue that as acceptance. And you talk about this in your podcast. We cannot always control how people might misperceive something. But then we go to the other side, being harsh. I'm not going to know it's sinful. It's like, look, they probably feel like you hate them already.
Yes. I think they already know how you feel.
They already know how you feel. And guess what? They probably hate themselves. So please show them love, show them grace. And guess what? It's not your words that are going to change them. It's God. So let God do his work and just be gracious and loving in that process.
Absolutely. And don't give up on people.
No,
because
never.
You were in your late 20s when you actually started living that life for the first time.
And I think it was like, I remember one of my close friends who knew what was going on. He's like, Aaron, I thought for a time we kind of lost you. In the most gracious way, he's just like, honestly, he was, there to encourage me the whole time. But like, and so I'm just really grateful he didn't give up on me, and my family hasn't. So like, we are all on a path, and they all live differently.
Awesome. Well, we rejoice in God's grace. And I want you to know that you are loved by God, by people, by your church. And I've seen that love. And your love doesn't rest on your performance. Your love doesn't rest on how well you do with these sin issues, that we love you regardless because the person who you are. And so I hope and pray that our listeners can think through that and pray through that and make sure that their love for people doesn't come with conditions on how well they perform or how well they manage their behavior.
Amen.
Amen. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Calibrate Conversations. Make sure you check out our website, calibrateministries.com. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you share with your friends. Go to calibrateministries.com and find out how you can support the ministry. We rely on support from people like you to do what we do. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.